For decades, we were told that certain phenomena in our skies did not exist. Today, we are beginning to hear about secret programs, recovered technologies, and investigations that may have been taking place for generations behind closed doors. But if that is true, an uncomfortable contradiction immediately emerges. If extraordinary technologies have been studied for decades, then humanity's real technological capabilities may be very different from the ones presented to the public. So how is it possible that, at the same time, we are told that Antarctica remains limited by ordinary problems such as fuel, logistics, distance, and weather? Perhaps the most important question is no longer what was hidden in the skies. Perhaps the most important question is what still remains hidden beyond the ice walls. There exists a contradiction that, should a certain revelation come to pass, could become one of the most extraordinary intellectual tensions in modern history. For decades, we were told that certain phenomena observed in the skies did not exist. Later, it was admitted that they did. Then it was acknowledged that they were real. Eventually, it was accepted that some of them displayed behaviors that were difficult to explain. Now we are beginning to hear with increasing frequency about the possibility of technological recovery programs, classified investigations, and even decades of study devoted to systems whose origins have still not been publicly clarified. If that process continues to advance, humanity may find itself facing an unusual situation. On one hand, we would be told that certain power structures concealed fundamental information for more than 80 years. On the other hand, we would be expected to continue accepting, without question, the rest of the explanations provided by those very same structures. And it is precisely here that a question emerges, which, curiously, almost never occupies the center of the debate. What is happening in Antarctica? Because Antarctica possesses a unique characteristic. It is not simply a continent. It is probably the most important territory on Earth that the overwhelming majority of humanity will never be able to verify through direct experience. Everything we know about it comes to us through governments, scientific organizations, international treaties, authorized expeditions, selected imagery, official maps, and institutional narratives. We know it almost exclusively through intermediaries. And it is precisely for this reason that Antarctica acquires extraordinary importance in the current context. If tomorrow it were officially admitted that certain institutions concealed relevant information about unknown phenomena for decades, the question would no longer be merely what they concealed about the skies. The inevitable question would become, what other areas of knowledge depend upon the very same mechanisms of trust? And no region on Earth depends more heavily upon those mechanisms than Antarctica. The contrast is striking. In 2026, anomalous phenomena in the skies and oceans are openly discussed. Secret programs are debated. Unknown materials are mentioned. Speculation exists regarding technologies that may be decades ahead of publicly known capabilities, including possible biological recovery programs. Yet whenever the conversation turns toward Antarctica, the answers seem to remain frozen in place. We are told that certain routes are not undertaken for logistical reasons, that specific operations are not viable for economic reasons, that some regions remain extremely difficult to document, that there is insufficient interest, that climatic conditions are too severe, that fuel-related issues continue to represent a significant limitation. And yet, the contradiction appears to become increasingly visible. Not because those explanations are necessarily false or entirely incorrect, but because they seem to belong to a completely different world from the one described when discussing classified programs, extraordinary technologies, or decades of research beyond public reach. The human mind perceives that tension even before fully articulating it. On one side, it hears that unknown technological capabilities may have existed for generations. On the other, it hears that certain questions regarding the most isolated region on Earth remain unanswered because of seemingly ordinary limitations. It is here that Antarctica ceases to be merely a geographical location and begins to transform into a genuine problem. Operation High Jump, the Tabarine expedition, subsequent polar operations, partially declassified archives, contradictory accounts, restricted zones, international treaties, and the countless questions accumulated over decades form part of a historical body that has never completely disappeared from the collective imagination. None of these elements proves any particular theory by itself, yet together they contribute to a persistent sensation, the impression that something unusually opaque surrounds the Antarctic continent. Perhaps the real mystery is why modern humanity appears to have accepted so easily that it does not need to know more about this region. Because the fundamental issue is no longer proving that a specific hypothesis is correct. The issue is understanding how the modern administration of knowledge functions. Once a society discovers that an important truth has been concealed for generations, it inevitably begins to wonder how many other truths may be subject to the same mechanism. Or will people simply be satisfied with being shown only one piece of the puzzle? A piece that, incidentally, would come from the very same structure that concealed it for more than 80 years. Because if the UAP revelations ultimately confirm that managed truths, protected secrets, and carefully controlled narratives existed for decades, perhaps it is time for millions of people to begin looking south once again. And perhaps then something unexpected will occur. The greatest revelation in modern history may not lead to an answer, but to a new question. A question far older, far more uncomfortable, and far more difficult to ignore. If this was the truth they were willing to reveal, what is it that they still do not want us to observe in Antarctica? And if that question ever begins to be answered, we may discover that revisiting only the last few decades will not be enough. Perhaps we will need to go back 298 years to understand when the story we were told about the last great unknown territory on Earth truly began.